Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, and you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the wonderful world of wine. I'm Kim, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark, and every week we talk to you about trending topics in the wine world and having conversations with interesting wine people. How are you this week, Mark?
Everything's great, Kim. Yourself?
I'm doing okay. Yeah, weather's getting a little cooler, and we're still here talking wine. And today's special guest is author and wine educator, Kiana Keys. So welcome to the show, Kiana.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here with you all today.
Wonderful. So we have been speaking to a lot of folks lately who have written wine books, whether they be educational or whether they be reference. And you have sort of an interesting take on the wine book that you wrote. Why don't you tell our listeners what you've done and kind of what got you to that place?
Yeah, so the book actually was a more like a compilation of publishings that I have written on my website. So I knew that I wanted to write the book, and instead of reinvent the wheel, what I did was I went through some of the publishings that I made on the site and post and kind of just put them in chronological order. So the book is called The Basics of Wine. So it really just starts at the beginning. What is wine? What are grapes? What's the difference between a white grape and a black grape? How's wine made? So I kind of went through the whole cycle of it. And then the second half of the book is more so about dialogue and conversation about wine, like what temperatures to serve wine at and how to order wine in a restaurant, how to enjoy wine at home, hoping to connect with some of the readers on a more personal level that maybe they could relate to. So I self-published a book. I had no idea how to publish, but I did a lot of research and I figured it out. It was pretty much just a compilation of a lot of the things that I've written in the past.
So you start out the book with this little bit about going to a wine tasting and people were saying, "Oh, this smells oaky." And you're like, "What the heck are you talking about?" So, it really does kind of, I think, hold the reader's hand and really like this is for somebody who really doesn't have much experience or knowledge at all. And you are here to kind of guide them through the super basics so that they can start to get a handle on all of that stuff that we talk about when we're describing wine and discussing wine.
Yeah, wine can be very intimidating. And I remember in 2004, I went out to a tasting room with my friend, and the wine just tasted like wine to me. I had no
Yeah.
other descriptors, and everyone else was, oh, it's this and that, and I felt left out. And that feeling never left me. And then, like over the years, I watched people struggle with showing others what they know, or they're scared to ask questions. Like wine is just such a weird topic, especially when you're out with others. And I wanted to master it. Once I realized I really like wine, but I don't know how to talk about it, there was something in me that really wanted to conquer it and master it so I would know what I was talking about. And then, like in the book, reaching back, I'm not so far removed from that myself. I remember when I first jumped into wine education and I didn't know. Like I had no idea. So I want people to know, like, everyone has to start somewhere. And you can learn it. You can absolutely learn it. So I went from it just tastes like wine to now I can pick out 12, 13 different flavor compounds, really. So yeah, my whole perspective on education is I'm not educating to other experts, although I do think that they would benefit from some of my writings. But I really try to write in the voice of someone that has no idea. So I work really carefully to craft my words for someone that has no idea, because that was me.
So, Kiana, the book is called Unpolished Grape 101, The Basics of Wine, and your website is the unpolishedgrape.com. What is the meaning behind unpolished grape?
So when I decided to pursue my own personal education in wine through a series of courses, I thought long and hard about what I wanted my name to be, my brand, so to speak. And it was important to me to find something that kind of represented who I was, unpolished, grape means I don't know everything. I'm unpolished. I'm learning. And even with the courses and with all the education, I'm still learning. I don't know what I'm doing half the time. And so I stuck with unpolished because it's kind of always the journey to learn more. You never know everything, but unpolished is me being humble to say, I don't know everything either. And hopefully that resonates with the readers.
I think it's a great way to approach wine because it's always changing. And as an educator, you know how difficult it can be to try to get everybody's questions answered that they want answered, but sometimes we just don't have those answers, especially with something like how long can a wine age? How long should you keep it open, if it's in the bottle? And so many times I'm like, my answer is like, it depends. It depends. It depends. And that can be really frustrating for students, but I think it's a good way to approach it anyway, because we as the educators, if we're admitting we don't know, it kind of opens the door for them to also feel that way. It's like, it's okay that you don't know everything.
Yeah, it's totally fine. That's what we're here for. Like wine is one of those things where there's almost like an infinite body of information.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I did the courses, but I can learn something new every single day. All I have to do is pick up a book or look at a podcast, and I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Like I did not know. And so I think like I just value education and knowledge in general. And so there's nothing to be ashamed about with not totally understanding something or not mastering something. It's all about the process of walking that journey. And I'm an open book. I like talking about the process. I like talking about the actual journey.
Kim and I love the idea of wine stories, and we're always talking about that and asking people their aha moments in wine. And you talked about your appreciation for wine history, I've read. Is there a particular story in the wine world that you love to tell or teach about?
Well, one story that I like is, I go back to what was most interesting to me as a wine enthusiast, connoisseur, and a student. I thought it was really interesting the way like sparkling wine is made and the whole science behind it, and how sparkling wine was, at least what we're taught, is that it was kind of made by accident, where wine was stored but unbeknownst to the wine producers, the fermentation hadn't necessarily finished. And when the wine was stored over the winter and spring came along and the temperatures got warmer, the yeast started waking up and they started re-fermenting the wine in the bottle. And that's kind of how we came about sparkling wine on accident. And I think it's really fascinating. I mean, it's science, it's happenstance, I tell that story because a lot of people like sparkling wine. A lot of people are familiar with it, but a lot of people are not familiar with the way that it's made. So I find it as a little interesting anecdote.
Yeah, it's a fun story to tell people because, yeah, a lot of the times people just don't know. And to be able to tell them something that has, like you said, the science, the history, just being able to tell a story about something happening by accident, and then we have this wonderful product. Yeah, super fun.
Yeah, it's really funny because I hear all sorts of, I hear people tell me all sorts of things about where sparkling wine came from. And I'm like, that's not really true. I don't think that's true. But, like once you learn a lot, it's when people tell you things, I just let them go with their stories. But that one always sticks out to me because I'm like, no, it's nothing fancy. This is actually just accident.
I knew Kim was going to get excited about that because she's the bubbly queen on this
love
show.
my bubbles.
And you did focus a lot on a chapter in your book on sparkling wine production. You had a good coverage of the regions and the different types of sparkling wines for different parts of the world. So I thought you did a really great job explaining that about the style differences of each country.
Oh, good. Thank you. And when it comes to my writings, especially for a website or the book, those are really just my notes for my class. So what I would do is I would take the notes and then I would put it into a form, like a dialogue that would make sense. And then I did all the graphics myself. So all the graphics that you see either in my book or on my website, I literally made those in like PowerPoint. And I was like, because I'm a picture person, I'm a visual person, I'm a visual learner. So I'm like, how does this tell the story? So yeah, I enjoy telling the story. I enjoy starting at the beginning and telling it in like really layman terms.
Have you always been in wine, or do you have professional background experiences?
Well, so my day job is actually finance and strategic management, which is boring. So when people ask me, what do I do? Like, I'm like, I like wine. It's just,
It's like I teach wine.
yeah, when I go into the finance piece, their eyes glaze over and it's just not really a conversation starter. So, I tell them I'm in finance, but that really like wine. I never actually liked wine at all. 2004, maybe, someone introduced me to the Moscato and I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. This is like finally a wine I can drink. And from there, it was, the fruity wines and then I didn't become like a serious wine drinker until maybe like 8 years ago, like serious. And then that's when it all began. But I've always liked wine and I always wanted to appreciate wine. I remember
Yeah.
hearing as a child that like just like such, I don't know, my wine had such a mystery behind it. And just it was for adults and it was for people that were graceful and that always had I was always intrigued by the mystery behind it. And I just started drinking it and lo and behold, I started really appreciating just the nuances, like the nuances between different grapes and different wines. And it's just really fascinating to me.
So is the overall approach and the goal of doing the book to show people this is how you learned wine and this is what you want to pass on for others to find interesting to get into wine? Is that was the overall goal?
Yeah, so I've always written, but I've been writing like publishing for the last maybe 10 or 12 years. And what I try to do is put myself in my audience's shoes to write in a way in which someone who has no idea what I'm talking about might be able to keep up. And so the book was a compilation of my notes from my courses, but they were simplified in a way that anyone could really read them and make sense of it and follow it. And then I would accompany it with pictures and graphics and charts, and because that's how I learn. I'm very linear, so I need bullet points, numbers. I need the picture to represent the paragraph I just read, and so that's kind of my style of when I write the book. It's here's the information and here's the picture to go along with it. Because to me, it's the most simplest way, at least for me. And I hope that there may be others out that learned in a similar style and that find it to be a really easy read.
It's a nicely flowing book. I liked how it starts with like the real basics and then kind of guide people into different topics, but then build off of what they've learned in the early part of the book. And by the time you get to the end, it's like you're talking about regions and grape varieties and what those flavors are that you should be tasting. But it really does sort of have a nice flow to it that I think is engaging and has a lot of educational merit. And I also like the pictures too. I think that the graphics are really helpful.
Yeah, that part is fun. I mean, when you writing is like structure is really important. And I had to the topics were just in topic form on my website. Here's this, here's that, here's red grapes or black grapes. But in the book, you're assuming that the reader is starting at the beginning. So you kind of want to walk them through it. And then, you define things at the beginning and then assuming that your reader starts picking up and understanding as you go along. So yes, the second half of the book is more like, okay, how do we apply what we've learned?
Yeah. I'm glad that you saved the wine tasting part for the end or
Yeah.
farther down into the book because, all the talk about flavors and things like that, you want people to have that basic understanding of how wine is made, what grapes, that kind of a thing. So it's cool.
Well, you can't talk about the tasting if you don't know the flavors.
Sure.
So
Yep.
it's first things first. Let's talk about what white grape flavors taste like. And then now let's talk about how to assess it.
Thank you for listening to The Wonderful World of Wine. We are your hosts, Mark Lenzi and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. Today's special guest is Kiana Keys. She's a wine educator and author. You can find more information about her on her website, unpolishedgrape.com. For more information about us, you can go to our website, thewww.wine. Our program is supported by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find all our past episodes on SoundCloud and iTunes. Welcome back. We're talking with Kiana Keys today. And Kiana, I had to ask you, in the beginning of the book, you say something about thanking your family for, quote, always putting up with you for talking about wine all the time. And I think Kim and I can relate to that because we bug our families a lot and talk about wine probably too much to them. How do you get people excited as a wine educator to bring them to your level of wine excitement?
I find that if I start talking at people, I immediately lose them. So I try to start by asking them questions like, what is it that you like? What do you know about it? So anytime anyone ever talks to me about wine, and I know that, or I suspect they don't know a whole lot, I try to get a feel for where they are. Like, what do you like? What do you like to drink? You like red wine? Oh, that's cool. I like red wine too. I try to do that, disarm them so that they realize that it's not a snobby conversation. And then what I do is I try to get a feel for what it is they're interested in, what they're looking for, and then I take cues from them to then know what it is I should talk about. And I just kind of from there. But I mean, I practice this in the grocery store. Like sometimes when I'm in the grocery store shopping for wine, I see someone, they look confused, and I'm like, what do you like to drink? I try to practice it. And the biggest thing for me is making others feel comfortable. Because I know how I used to feel when I talked about it. I used to be really self-conscious. I didn't know the words because I know I was saying the wrong things. And so like I try to let them know, like, that's okay. You don't have to use the right words. I understand what you're saying. So that's kind of my approach. And then when I got them, when I feel like they're really listening, then I try to challenge them and I'll teach them something, or I'll, ask them, what are you interested in? What do you want to learn about? And then I'll, give them like a little beginner's lesson about it. But I try not to make it too heavy. You'll lose people, and no one cares at the level that I do. I mean, most people don't care at the level that I do. So that's the best way to quickly lose people. So I just try to keep it light and simple.
I like the engagement and trying to make people feel a level of comfort with you. And I think that's really important, especially for wine, where it does sort of carry this idea behind it of it could be snobby, it could be really difficult to understand. And like right off the bat, you're like trying to make those connections. And I think that's really important for a wine educator.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want them to be the driver of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want them to feel like they're a spectator in what it is I'm trying to teach. I want them to be the driver. That's really important to me, for them to feel really confident in what it is that they're trying to communicate to me about wine. And then I go from there. So almost like we're partners in it. And I can do that because I was there. Like, I really remember what that's like. You're trying to communicate wine. You don't know the right words. You don't want to be judged. The very first thing I do is I'm like, relax. This is fun.
One of the things you mentioned in the book that I see rarely covered by educators or in books was talking about wine blends. And it's not just about blending of grapes, it's oaks, it's styles, it's why is it done. And you described that very well within your book. Can you talk to our listeners a little bit about wine blends and your approach of why you thought that was a topic they should know about?
Well, so many wines are blended. Probably the majority of them, I would say. And a lot of wines have the word blend on there. And so people don't necessarily know what blend means. People don't necessarily know what vintage means, in terms of like the year in which the grapes were harvested. And a lot of wines are not just 1 year. They're blended for many different reasons. And it's important to know when you're drinking wine that it's probably not just from one batch of grapes. It could be regional, blends, especially like in Australia, they blend from many different regions, sometimes even as big as Australia is, they may even blend like West Coast and East Coast, and then between years, so vintages. So, one vintage may be really successful, the other needs a little help, so you blend them together. It could also be to cover up faults. Maybe this wine is a little bit too acidic, or, it was a really cool year this year, so we had to, add some wines from a warmer climate to round it out, something that's a little more juicy, so it wouldn't be so austere in the approach. But I mean, wine blending is a huge part of wine making in general. And when I was taking the courses, it's everything that we learned is about the blending. Like, it's just a huge component of wine production. And I just wanted to let the readers know, because I did not know that. So I felt that was interesting to know.
Yeah, you're so right about the misunderstanding about what blending is all about. And usually when people think about a blend, they just think grape varieties, right? So it's like, oh, okay, Cabernet Merlot, that's a blend. I get it. But that other aspect of blending, whether it's blending place, whether it's blending vintage, and why, the purpose of it, I absolutely agree with you that I think that this is something that most wine drinkers or even students really have never even thought about before. So I do like that you have such an important discussion in your book about blending, because that really can be an eye-opening thing for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, for wine producers, blending can save your wine because
Yeah.
God forbid you have a bad vintage or you make a mistake or there's a fault, there's a wine fault meaning there is something about the wine that's a little bit off that
Mm-hmm.
the consumer would not necessarily enjoy or something that the consumer could pick up on. So
Mm-hmm.
you may have barrels that from another year in which you blend those together and now you have a product that you can sell to a consumer that a consumer would enjoy. So blending is really, really, really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about tasting wine. Kim and I on the show a lot of times tasting a lot of wine, and I don't think we've really focused too much, Kim, on maybe the steps on how we taste. So can you tell us what's Kiana's steps on how you taste wine?
Yeah, so I have to credit most of this to my educational courses that I took because I did not know that there was a way to taste wine. But you want to start with the appearance. The appearance can tell you a lot about wine, actually. If it's deeply colored, if it's lightly colored, if it has legs, wine legs on the side, which are like the wine is literally like crawling up the side of the glass after you swirl it. Those things can tell us about wine. And I always find like when I open up a bottle that I've never had, I look at the color. I'm like, is it red or is it dark? Because that'll tell me, is it more red fruit or is it more dark fruit? And I personally prefer like red fruit. So I'm normally like looking for wines that have more red in color. Then you want to smell it. Our nose is extremely important in terms of our taste. And so smelling it is the first step of what we taste. So smelling the fruit aromas, the floral, there's all sorts of different things you can smell, whether it's like in sparkling wine, you might smell bread or, toast. It's really interesting what you smell. And then when you taste it, your taste should match what you smell. It should, because they're all connected. And so once you taste it, you may even find more things like, oh, this tastes like cinnamon. I didn't even smell that, but now it tastes
Mm.
like cinnamon. And one of my most favorite things about tasting wine, even when I'm not doing it for like a course, so I'm not writing anything on it, the two biggest things that stand out to me are concentration and the wine finish. So the concentration is almost like how concentrated, like how deeply concentrated, like is this like extremely a strong, like flavorful? Or does it taste a little, like I'm trying to find a word, like is it a little weak? Like is the flavor a little weak? And it also goes hand in hand with the finish, which is how long those yummy flavors stay in your mouth. And so I think about that all the time. Like when I'm drinking a glass of wine, I'm like, oh, this has a long finish, or like it's been 30 seconds and I'm still tasting this wine. Or
Mm.
like as soon as I put the wine in my mouth, like the flavor goes away. That's a short finish. And so I consciously and subconsciously, actually, when I taste a glass of wine, I like to think about the concentration and how long it lasts in my mouth. Because for me, those are the biggest qualifiers as to quality of the wine. I was drinking something last night, and as soon as I tasted it, like the flavor disappeared. I was like, oh, that's a short finish. Okay. Like, all right, that's a little bit disappointing. But yeah, they're both indicators of quality wine, or at least they could be. They could be.
I wanted to ask where you teach your classes. Do you do online classes? Are they in-person classes?
I don't necessarily teach formal classes. I do wine education through written work,
Oh,
uh,
okay.
written work and pictures. I mean, there's a lot of people that teach on podcasts. There's, in-person classes. There's virtual Zoom classes. My talent is writing and teaching through graphics, really, words and graphics. That is mainly how I do have some opportunities coming up in the future now that I finish my courses where I can do some in-person teaching. But for the most part now, it's through written work.
Did you finish your diploma?
I did.
Congratulations.
I took it in May. Well, I took my last course in May, the big beast, as they call it, the one
Yeah.
in the world. And I had no idea how I was going to go. No idea. Like you just kind of just never know.
Hmm.
And I pretty much screamed when I learned that I passed it.
Yay.
It was quite a cost. I had, put it this way, I had to reassimilate back into human life
Oh boy.
after the exam. And
Yeah.
they don't tell you that part, but
It is quite the commitment, both the time and the money and the focus and just how you have to like commit to the educational part of it and just like throw yourself into it.
it's, I mean, I would wake up, I would open my eyes and grab my notebook and start reading. And I would do it all day and I would go to sleep with the book in my hand. I mean, it's a really high cost, honestly. Not just the expense of the courses and the expense of wine, it's the cost to your social life. I didn't really have a social life for the last 2 years or so. And anyone that I came around, all I was talking about was wine. And
Your poor
so
friends, they just had to listen to you with your
oh,
class
my
stuff.
poor mom. Like, oh my, she was
Oh.
such a good sport. But the thing is, when you're grappling with something really tough, sometimes you just have to bounce it off of someone. You have to say the words out loud. And so there were points when I didn't care when if no one knew what I was talking about or if they didn't care. I needed to say what I learned out loud for
Hmm.
my own benefit. So it was a cost. It was a cost. But the relief not having to have that tunnel vision again and to just go back to enjoying it in a lighthearted way is
Hmm.
very welcoming.
Well, congratulations, because that is
Thank
quite the
you.
achievement.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know you have a passion for food and wine, and I saw you're working on another food and wine book, correct? Is that something coming
That
soon?
is that is correct, and I am almost finished with it actually.
So let's talk about food and wine pairings. How do you explore food and wine pairings to come up with the book idea? Or do you have things you like pairing food and wine and things you found you don't like?
So my book is based off of a lot of research. It's research and it's what I've learned and it's science. I am a vegetarian. I don't eat meat. So there are a lot of food and wine pairings in the book that I personally haven't tried, at least not for some time. I've been a vegetarian for about 7 years now. So, but there's a science to it, like pairing heavy steaks with red, tannic, bold wines. I mean,
Hmm.
that's science. I don't necessarily need to taste the steak to know that it goes well. But the book itself it's a little different from the other book that I wrote. It's more of a picture book. Like it's really simple. And what it does is it's 60 wines. I go through 30 white and 30 red wines. And I basically just say, for this wine, for example, Sauvignon Blanc, here are the snacks that you eat with it. Here are the meats, here's the seafood, and here's the cheese. And it's heavy on the pictures. I want it to be like a book that you can keep in your kitchen. And if you're hosting or if you're eating dinner, you can just quickly just flip through it. So it's more just like a quick reference book of pairing. And then I do talk about the flavors of white wine, the flavors of red wine, and in general, what types of foods you eat with both of those. But then another interesting thing is that I have for each of the wines, at least for most of them, I talk about the local favorites. So I talk about, for example, in Italy, if you're drinking Sangiovese, it might be paired with a pizza, or I give local examples of foods that go with the local wine, or if it's from Spain, or I talk about tapas and paella and other Spanish entrees. So I try to give the reader a view into the world of where this was originated from. What do they eat with? So I talk about that in the book as well.
So I wanted to get back, Kiana, to we were talking about tasting wine, and originally you said when you first started tasting wine, you thought, yeah, that tastes like wine. How did you build your palate to then go from it tastes like grape juice or it tastes like grapes to I can taste the cherry, I can taste the oak? What's your tips on how to build your wine palate?
Practice and being conscious and being present when you drink it. I remember when I first started, I remember being in my WSET 1 class, like all I taste is red. Like just one flavor, just red. I just taste red. It just took practice and I just kept practicing. One thing that I did with my instructors is I just asked them, like, what do you mean when you taste strawberry? What are you tasting? And so I was asking questions. I was having dialogues with others. Another thing that I did was I purchased what do you call it? they're scents. So it's like vials. Like
Oh,
it's
the
like,
aroma kits.
yes, aroma.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I mean, they're a little expensive, but I felt like I had a deficit. I didn't naturally taste all those things. And so I would practice with the aroma kit. I think it came in like 48 different
Hmm.
aromas. And I was like, oh, that's what smoke smells like. Got it. And I would memorize the smell, or like, oh, that's barnyard. Cause I mean like
Hmm.
that like barnyard funky smell aroma comes up sometimes when we drink wine. And so the aroma kit helped with a lot of scents that were not in my house. Like I don't know what barnyard smells like. I live in a city. I live in a city. I have no idea. Or
Yeah.
a niece, or so the kids help with the scents that I did not have access to. But the other thing is that if you just start smelling things all the time, just get in the habit of looking in your spice cabinet and smelling strawberries and smelling cherries, bananas, like all those things, eventually your nose and your brain just start memorizing. And so over time, the combination of working with my instructors to hear what it is they picked up, me using the aroma kit, me smelling things in my kitchen, me just practicing tasting over and over and over again, reading tasting notes. Eventually, you just kind of get it. You just kind of get it, pick it up.
It's such a good, like, real world way of telling people, like, how you practice. And I think that the smelling things is, like, so key. I sometimes tell people just, like, go to the grocery store and just smell your way through the produce department if it's something that you don't ordinarily eat or don't ordinarily buy or have any experience with.
Just smell it. I mean, our brains are interesting. Our brains like remember scents.
Hmm.
We remember it. And so sometimes I literally just close my eyes, like, what does this smell like?
Hmm.
Then memorize that smell, and it's interesting because you'll be drinking wine like, oh, I know this from somewhere.
Right.
Suddenly it'll just come to you. Also, when you pair wine with food, a lot of the flavors become more prominent as well. So sometimes wine tastes more homogeneous when I'm drinking it by itself, but then once I start drinking it with food, even like something small like potato chips or popcorn,
Mm.
I'm suddenly able to pick up more that's in the wine.
It's the salt. Salt makes everything better.
It does. It really, salt really makes your wine taste flavorful
Hmm.
and fruity, and those notes really start jumping out at you. Oh, and don't forget swirling your wine, getting the oxygen in there. It opens up a lot of those scents and those flavors for you too. So you always want to swirl it before you drink it.
You had a chapter in the book on wine labels, and you gave a lot of tips on reading wine labels. Can you tell our listeners a tip if they go into a retail store shopping for wine, how they can use a wine label or your secret shopping tip that you would suggest?
It's a little bit challenging because it depends on which region you're looking in. You're going to be more familiar with the words in your area. So for example, a lot of wines from America, mainly, California, Oregon, Washington, they're going to have the variety on the label. So it might say Cabernet Sauvignon, it might say Merlot, it might say Chardonnay. That's pretty easy. I think where it gets a little difficult is when you go into regions that you're not familiar with, and those labels are actually, or the names of the wines are actually by the place. So Chateauneuf de Pop or Burgundy. Like I had before I did my wine class, I had no idea Burgundy was Pinot Noir or Chardonnay. I didn't know Burgundy sounded so much more, more complex. Once you become familiar with, well, what did they make in Burgundy? Well, they pretty much only make Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So then it's like, oh, okay, well, I have a little bit of familiarity with when I see Burgundy, if it's red, it's Pinot Noir, if it's white, it's Chardonnay for the most part. So yeah, so I mean, in America, we go by the grape. And then in the old world, so anything that's, mostly Europe, sometimes it could have the grape name, but in most cases, it's going to have the name of the place. So you kind of have to be just a little familiar. And if you're not familiar, you just ask. I mean, the people that work in the wine store are just, for the most part, dying to talk. Like they love talking about it. So they don't mind sharing that. The other thing is if you see a year on there, then that refers to the vintage. And so that is the year in which the grapes were harvest. And in most cases, if you see the year, like most wine regions have laws about if you put a year on a wine bottle, like if I put 2024, that means for the most part, most of the grapes, if not all of them, have to be from that year. Or sometimes it might be 70% of the grapes, 75, 80%. But you want to look at the vintage too. There's been times like I like older wine, less juicy, more structured. So like I like wine from like the 2015, 2016 vintage. So there's been times that I literally walked to the grocery store and I'm literally only looking for the vintage. I'm looking for something that says 2015 or 2016. It doesn't even matter what it is, but I'm looking for that aged sort of wine that's aged in the bottle. Otherwise, on the label, there's the producer. There's for those that like sweet wine, you always want to pay attention to the ABV, the alcohol by volume. That'll tell you how sweet something is. So if I pick up a Riesling and I want it to be dry, if it says 10%, it's gonna have some sugar in there. Just being a little familiar with what might be dry versus sweet. I do that very often, especially for white wine. I'm always looking at the alcohol content to see, am I drinking something sweet or is it dry? Is it off dry?
Great. Good tips.
Yeah, lots of good tips. I think it's always helpful for people just have, that little bit of knowledge so that when they at least go shopping, they can feel like they know something about what is being told to them by the wine label.
It can be really overwhelming. Like
it totally can be.
Looking at all those different wine bottles, and it's funny. I mean, I had a friend recently that I ran into in the wine store, and she was like, "I just want something that looks expensive." And because I picked out a couple of screw caps, and she says, "No, it has to look expensive." And so I started giving her the lecture about, screw caps doesn't necessarily mean that it's less quality, but she was sold on it has to have the corks. I said, "Okay." So I was looking for something that looked a little expensive, but something that I also knew was quality. So yeah, I try to help out people when I can and tell them not to overthink it too much.
Great. Thank you, Kiana. Thanks for all the insight. And for our listeners, Kiana's website is unpolishedgrape.com. Her book is Unpolished Grape 101, The Basics of Wine. Thank you for everything, Kiana. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed talking to you both.
Thank you for listening to us today on The Wonderful World of Wine. We have been your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lenzi, with our special guest, Kiana Keys. Kiana's website is unpolishedgrape.com, and you can find her on social media at Unpolished Grape. Our show is sponsored by Franklin Public Radio, and you can find us at thewww.wine. Cheers.
Cheers.